Please let us bow our heads and say a prayer together. Lord, these are the kind of parables that us Americans cannot stand. Help us to have ears to hear it afresh and anew, as if they were coming directly from your mouth. Amen. Have a seat. Chuck Mangione. That's the one I forgot. But that's my bone to you boomers, because he's a little older than Gen X. Chuck Mangione. You kids know who Chuck Mangione is? You do. Of course you do. You grew up in that household right over there. I'm not going to talk about Chuck Mangione. I have another story for another day, and I have a high school friend here, and she's sworn to take the fifth anytime you ask her at Coffee and Connection. Oh, tell us about Tom Warren when he was in high school. I won't even identify her and her husband right now. You're going to have to figure that out for yourself. Vanity, vanity, vanity. It's all vanity. It's one of the more popular, well-known Old Testament passages, and it was an option in our lectionary choosing today, so I grabbed it because I wanted to start off. I'm going to preach on a parable about the rich fool. It's amazing how the Old Testament kind of foreshadows what's coming in the New Testament. In fact, it foreshadows the basic human condition, which, by the way, Jesus had more to say about our material possessions and how they control us and how we bow down to them than anything else. Let me just start from right at the get-go, because like I said, if the preacher anywhere near their salt man or woman in North America preaches about money, it's right away, it's hard for you guys to hear. It's hard for me to preach it. But I'm going to talk about not money per se, because let's face it, money's not bad. Like, I'll take your $10 million and I'll put it to good use. I'm kidding, no kidding. I mean, so, it's not that the money or the accumulation of the money is bad. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you then what our passage from Luke is about. This guy, next to the woman we heard last week, Martha, are the only two people in all the New Testament who get up in Jesus' grill and says, hey, listen here, man. What did Martha say last week? Tell my sister to get off her feet and get in there in the kitchen and help me, right? That was Martha last week. And now this week we have the rich ruler saying, hey, man, tell my brother to make sure he splits the inheritance the right way. Interesting. And that's okay. I told you it's okay to talk to Jesus like that. So Jesus has been, up to this point, encouraging his followers to understand the big picture. It's amazing how we lose sight of the big picture because we're so myopic, and we were no different from first century Palestine, but now in 2025, no one knows the big picture anymore. It's basically what's on your device right in front of your nose. Just walk down the street in any major city anywhere in the world and see how many people have their head down on their phone. No one walks by anybody anymore and makes eye contact and says, hey, how you doing? God bless, have a nice day. Rather than giving the kind of judgment, Jesus says this: beware, watch out, be on guard against greed. There it is, not money, but greed, hoarding it. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. So let me ask, and here it is, not a rhetorical question. I'm going to take Phil Donahue style. You're going to shout it out, and you're going to respond to my question. How would you define the good life? Take a second, and anybody can you don't even have to raise your hand. How would you define the good life? Anybody want to take a stab? Go hold it. Who said something? Good health. I'll take that one. Friends. Family. Faith. Love. service. Jesus knew, thank you, it's all good. Jesus knew that material things, no matter how fun and comforting and lovely and useful they are, will never completely satisfy. Kids, prick up your ears, because you're going to be making $1 million by the time you're 30. You'll remember me from this pulpit say to you, you can make all the money in the world, and it will never satisfy like Jesus satisfies. We always want more. Boy, it's tough growing up in this country of ours because there are idols galore, and you remember what Jesus had to say. In fact, he says it again in a few more chapters in Luke. You cannot serve God and mammon. Eugene Peterson translates it, you cannot serve God and the bank. I'll add, you cannot serve God and the Dow Jones Industrial Average. You get me. Just as the prophets in the Hebrew Scripture called people back repeatedly from worshiping other gods than the God of Israel, Paul, Jesus, preaches a gospel of spiritual values centered on the one true God. This is important. This is where we get lost in the accumulation of goods. Remember that bumper sticker, the one with the most... Who dies wins. Thank you very much. If you're like me, you watch a lot of television. There's a story when my parents moved to Newport, Pennsylvania in 1975. The boxes were still unpacked, but the one thing out of the box was a Sony Trinitron. And I had that sucker plugged in, and I was sat in front of it watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Sesame Street, Fantasy Island, Dynasty, Dallas. Remember that? And the last two I point out because, see, they're a precursor to, because they always recycle basically these kinds of they're like soap operas about wealth. And fast forward, how many have seen the HBO Succession? Yeah? Or how about the other one, Billions? Yeah? Tina, we're the only ones who watch that schmuck. It's escapist. Frankly, I'm not going to lie. I like seeing really, really, really wealthy people having really, really lousy lives. Good, they didn't hear that. For years. No, there's a guilty pleasure there, isn't there? Nothing like seeing the Logan Roy family go at each other's throats over who's going to get daddy's money. Jesus' parable today offers a wonderful opportunity to explore the question of what really matters. Like I said, we live in a country where enormous wealth and a persistent poverty stand side by side. I don't have to tell you that. And the gospel calls us to wrestle with the question of money and material goods in relation to the common good. For example, the man building bigger barns to store his treasure might we be tempted, like him, to build bigger, fancier football stadiums? We live in the Portland, Vancouver metro area where it is on the chopping block with the powers that be to build a brand new, and I'm not knocking baseball. It's a great sport, brings people out. If they're going to build a new baseball stadium, I hope there's a lot of private investment and not just tax dollars into it. And I hope they can keep the price of admission down so a dad or a mom can take their 4 kids, get some hot dogs and a beer, and get out of there for $50. There you are. There you are. But that's what we're doing. And if you follow anything about the Blazers, where's Dave Herbenson? To keep the Blazers in town, the NBA is telling us we have to remodel and renovate the Moda Center. You already know that's not going to be a $10 renovation. So where's that money going to come from? And while we're pouring money into a new baseball stadium in downtown on the riverfront, on the Willamette, and the renovation of the Moda Center, I encourage you to just go over to Stark and Yamhill, or 82nd and Burnside, or Stark and 80th, and just see the depravity. Just see how we're taking care of the least of these. When I said a couple weeks ago, and I'll say it again in case you weren't here, when we live in the wealthiest country in the history of the planet, in the history of, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. Maybe we can talk more about that. We see it every week. Some of us, Janet, you're doing a great job. You guys and gals who help us with this free summer meal program. What if I told you that the numbers this summer of kids coming off the street during the week to get a free lunch are going this way and not this way? You know, I'm a simple guy. I think you're simple people, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. It's not like rocket science to take care of people, and especially, now I'm going to drill down on our veterans. They fought for this country, and you go over to the VA and just talk to the folk who work over in the VA, and they'll tell you how strapped they are over there. The cuts. Not to mention the homeless brothers and sisters who fought for our nation wandering the streets. Friends, I can say it because it's true. We should be ashamed of ourselves. Thank you. How can we forget our vets like that? But we do. We do. This parable, now I'm getting down to micro. That's macro level. It also addresses our personal financial house, our personal financial wellness, which, as my pastoral theology professor, who's dead and gone to heaven, Charles Du Bois, the Reverend Dr. Charles Du Bois, he got all of us in his class to get out our checkbooks. I know no one carries checkbooks anymore, but this is 1994. And we're like, okay, so we got out our checkbooks, and he said, I want you to open up your checkbook, and I want you to look at the stubs. I want you to look where all your money's going, and ask yourself, where is God in all of that? And honest to God, you know, it's water company, it's cable company, it's cell phone company, it's laser tickets, Timbers tickets, subscription to the New Yorker. Oh, there's something I gave to the church, or I gave to this charity. My cell phone bill is more than that. I said before, I was a bit of a cheapskate. My father and mother, they really didn't really tell us boys to tithe, because it's an Episcopalian thing. You know, you don't do that. Like, my dad not talking about money, so we never talked about it. But it was when I got married to Sarn, and she said, you know, we're going to start tithing because now we're married. And I gave her like what are you talking about? I'm not tithing. 10% of my income? I'm a teacher. I don't make that much. And she gave me the stink eye. So I've given 10% and more, because I give 10 to God and everything else to, you know, places I care about that do good work. That's above and beyond the 10%. And I'm not bragging. You can thank Sarn for that. But and some of you, I know you're not there, and I know the times we live in. I'm talking to people who in the last 6 months have been made redundant. That means let go, pink slip, no longer are working. You've been given golden parachutes from the government. You've been told you're done. We don't need you anymore. It is a big deal that we are living right now when people are living hand to mouth. And I'm talking people in the big homes with a 2-car garage, and no one knows how bad it is. And you are stressed out. Because your retirement, you saw it this week, 700 points on the Dow, boom. And you know you checked your retirement like I did, and you lost thousands of dollars in one day. Just saying. Eugene Peterson translates the very last sentence, which says, rich toward God. Eugene Peterson, in his translation of the Message, says this is his translation of the very last verse of the gospel today. That's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God. That's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God. The rich fool doesn't seem like an evil man, okay? and it's not like he cheated. It doesn't have any indication that he cheated and he stole his wealth and he had nefarious ways of getting rich. Okay, the trap he falls into is when he has his windfall, he doesn't run into the village or call his neighbors and celebrate this good fortune. He doesn't ask, hey, how can I spread it around? How can I pay it forward? What does he do? He says 11 times in the first person. He uses an I statement 11 times. I am this, I am that, my barn, my stuff, I, my, never, ours. That's key. I came across two things of people I know, and I know Warren Buffett, God rest that Omaha, Nebraska boy's soul, and he's not dead yet. But, he did this big thing with the billionaires to get them to give up most of their wealth before they die. So I want to give him credit. I want to give this CEO, Sarah Blakely. I know, you're thinking, what is he doing? Well, she founded Women Perk Your Ears Up. She founded Spanx. If you don't know what Spanx is, it's not a bad word. I hope I don't get reported on YouTube for inappropriate content, because it's actually a Fortune 500 company which women love. The owner, Sarah Blakely, sold a majority stake of her company. Okay, she made $1.2 billion. But she celebrated by gifting each of her employees. Now, you might not think this is much. 2 first-class tickets to anywhere in the world, plus $10,000 spending cash. And then I was watching Jon Stewart on Comedy Central. Shameless plug. If you want to get the news from a guy who delivers it with such masterful delivery and scalpel-like precision and fact-checking accuracy, I mean it. He had the Reverend, well, he might not be a Reverend. I think he's a Reverend because he's so generous. Maybe you saw it. The guy who owns, talking about the Blazers, there's a Chinese via South African doctor named Patrick Soon-Shiong. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong. I didn't know this. He bought a minority share in the Lakers. Where's Sammy? Sammy. I said Los Angeles Lakers. That's his team. I'd never heard of the guy. Jon Stewart had him on because this guy invented a breast cancer drug. I can't pronounce the name of it, where he made $1 billion. And about a year or so ago, a friend in Los Angeles called him up and said, Patrick, they're going to shut down the Los Angeles Times unless you buy it. He says, what do I want to buy the Times? His friend said, because it's the Los Angeles Times, it's like crucial to our democracy to have a free press. And if that goes under, democracy starts going under. He said, let me talk to my wife. Evan, just word to the wise. When you have millions of dollars someday and someone asks you to buy something, make sure you talk to your wife. So he bought the Los Angeles Times for $500 million, $500 million. It's nothing to him. But even better, the Green Bay Packers are owned by their fans. The shareholders for the Green Bay Packer football team are owned by their fans. They make the decisions for that team. So there's no Jerry Jones at the top of the food chain for Dallas making decisions to pick on Jerry. So Patrick, when he bought the Times, he's now democratizing the entire newspaper and giving all of its employees shares in it so they can keep it going forever and ever and ever, because it's bottom up. They own it, they will protect it, and no one can buy them out. Think about that. That's a good use, instead of building barns and talking about me, myself, and I, how I can help the common good. Now I've lost you because I've been talking about money the whole time, and nothing is more boring than money and sex, believe it or not. The real deep issue to the parable is one of, where are your values? Where are my values? Do I put my faith in things that if the Lord called me tomorrow to the gates of St. Peter, will I die a happy man, knowing I did my best to share what I have, not just money, myself. Now I'm on it. It is really easy to throw money at something, and money solves problems, as Grandpa used to say. But some of you know when I say to you, when you get off your duff and you get in the car and you go to a homeless shelter, when you serve meals, when you put money in scholarships for disadvantaged kids from the inner city, and not just put money in a scholarship, but go to the assembly where the kids come up on stage with you and you get to eyeball the child, shake their hand, look them in the eye, and say, "You are a beautiful child with all the potential in the world, and I believe in you." When you make your millions, including y'all, not just Evan, I want to be gender inclusive here, your sister, Gabriel, when you make your millions, Jesus is really on about, don't ever lose your personal touch. The personal touch is all the difference in the world, and you don't need any amount of money to do that. So now I've just brought back in everybody here who has been stressing from the very first word out of my mouth that I don't make enough money to do what Tom's telling me to do, to spread it around like all these billionaires. Let me tell you again, you don't have to have a nickel to your name to make a difference in somebody's life by giving them a kind smile and telling them they're awesome. You tell that gal at Trader Joe's who's checking you out, "You're awesome, man." She'll probably call security on you. Parents, do you tell your kids they're awesome, but in a way that, they can get it? Not just, "Oh, you're awesome," but look them in the eye. And when they want a new device, you tell them, "No, you're not going to get a new iPad." "Oh, why not, Mom? Why not?" "Because we're going to go throw the baseball and play some catch. Or we're going to go fishing and catch a trout. Or we're going to walk up some hill and take in the beauty of God's creation in this beloved gorge of ours out there." Let me read to you the final verses of this chapter from Luke, which conveniently the lectionary writers left off, but Eugene Peterson is nailing it on the head when he says these words. Listen carefully. These are verses 29 through 31 of Luke 12. Eugene translates the Gospel of Luke with these words, verses 29 through 31. He says, "What I'm trying to do here is to get you to relax." That's beautiful. Let me say that one more time, lest I've gotten your blood pressure up this morning. What I'm trying to do in this pulpit is to get you to relax. Not be so preoccupied with getting so you can respond to God's giving. I'll say that again. Not be so preoccupied to getting, grabbing, clinging, but responding to God's giving. Everything comes from God, right? He continues, "People who don't know God and the way He works fuss over these things, but you know both God and how God works. So steep yourself in God reality, in God initiative, in God provisions, and you'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met." And lastly, to quote a famous saint, Saint Basil the Great, Saint Basil challenges us all once again with his famous statement, his famous quote. They give it to him, whether it was him or not, it's still a banger. Saint Basil says this: "That unused coat in your closet doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the poor. What are some of the unused things, not just in your closet, but in your heart, that you could give to someone else? Because when you do that, I will declare you the richest person in the world. Amen.